We're wrapping up 2 days of story meetings and getting closer and closer to the production of Out of Egypt and Lessons from the Land, the Exodus. Today, we sat down with Justin Dobbs, a guy who has served behind the scenes on several projects and is one of the writers on Out of Egypt. We talk about how the Exodus story fits into the overall biblical story and how Exodus is our story. That's coming up next on inRoads. Welcome to inRoads, where we share real-world examples of digital evangelism and provide tips on how you can use today's technology to spread the gospel. Learn more about us and watch our free video series at appianmedia.org. Appian Media is currently fundraising for post-production for our next documentary series, Out of Egypt. The project will take an extraordinary journey through Egypt and Jordan as we look at one of the possible routes of the Exodus. We'll have a lot more of Out of Egypt coming up later in the show.
All right, so we are wrapping up 2.5 days of like solid story meeting.
I'm exhausted. I mean, it's been so much. Yeah, the amount of brain power that's been necessary. No, I just got here.
That's
honestly.
right. I was just saying, if you can't see in Craig's body language, he's a little sarcastic. But no,
you guys, you and Jeremy and Justin have been. You say 2.5, like 72 hours. It seems like you guys have been here, bunkered down, working hard.
And it was like, to pull the curtain back a little bit. We would wake up in the morning and basically grab a cup of coffee, come downstairs about 9 a.m. and work until lunch, go upstairs, grab a quick bite, come back down. And like last night, we worked until dinner, went up, had dinner, came back down, and did more. Wow. And so, we knew that we needed to create space for this. And it couldn't just be a couple hours here and there between doing other things. It needed to be in a bunker.
Yeah.
And just, and Jeremy kept calling it the war room. And I love that. It's like, whenever you want to get stuff done efficiently, you get people around the table and you focus and focus and focus. And we're going to do that here soon with the production team to really kind of hone in on the things we need to do in the field. So,
you need sticky notes.
Evidently,
obviously.
I will bring sticky notes to that meeting.
That's color-coordinated sticky notes.
That's right.
For those watching the podcast, the wall behind us is there is method to this madness, and it's brilliant. It's genius. I'm loving this. And so you had a conversation with Justin about this.
Yes.
About the Exodus story as a whole, what it means for the Jew.
Right.
And what it means for those of us who don't have Jewish heritage.
Exactly.
And how it's still very much our story too.
It is, and it's such a beautiful story. And I'll be honest, like every time I read this story now, I'm peeling back layers and going, oh man, I never saw that before. And there were things, you kind of joked about the strings going between, like there were things that when you look for the symbols and when you look for the Easter eggs within the story, and then you look forward into first century and into our time, you're like, what is going on? This is so crazy.
There's so much foreshadowing.
There is.
And it's not like some people want to do with, say, the book of Revelation, where there's these super secret things that only those with the code know how to crack it. Like that was not God's intention for Exodus at all.
Right.
But he's setting up so many things that later in the Old Testament you go, I've heard this before.
Exactly.
And then you get to Jesus and go, oh, this is what it was about the whole time.
And then you can start to see how first century Christians, Jews that then became Christians, when they were looking for this Messiah, and they were looking back to the Moses-like figures and the Passover and the Passover lamb, how they would have been excited about this Messiah, because they were looking for them all the way back to the Exodus, and so that's the kind of stuff that Justin really he loves that stuff.
Oh yes,
and you can tell.
Yeah, he gets so fired up about it. And so I'm excited for us to share this conversation that you had with Justin.
So Justin, we are 2.5 days into our writers meeting, our story meeting.
Yes.
Is your head about ready to explode like mine?
I think that's my response right there. It's a lot to go through. It's 40 chapters. The project Out of Egypt, we're looking at the book of Exodus. And we've never done a project that covers this amount of text before. And on top of that, we're trying to wrap our minds around the Exodus is, while it's a book, it's more than just a book, it's the event. And that goes through Leviticus,
Yeah.
a lot of Numbers, Deuteronomy. We're moving into wandering in the wilderness. So trying to think of the best way to tell that story, not just to cover the text. So yeah, it's a lot of information. So yeah, it's been good though. I'm excited about what we've come up with.
Yeah, and you kind of on day one, you set the tone, you put it into perspective. When we were doing Trial and Triumph, we covered 3 chapters.
Right.
And now we're doing 40 chapters. And for those watching at home on YouTube, there is one pink card up here that covers 3 books of the Bible.
How frustrating. Yes. It's been tough. We're looking at, Trial and Triumph was 2 hours roundabout. It's one project. And this, we're trying to break it back up into better bite-sized chunks. And yet there's still kind of an episode 5. We keep talking about episode 5. We're using the terms the back of the tapestry or the binding around the quilt, because Exodus is not just what we don't want to do with this is just tell the story of the Exodus or just talk about the event, but it's the way that it impacts the rest of the Bible story, both going forward and backward, as well as connecting to every person's story. So episode 5 is not a real thing, but we talk about it because that's the reason we're telling this story. So yeah, it's one little sticky
card.
note there, and it's not fair. Jeremy and I have both bemoaned that, but you can't tell all the Bible stories in one go. And I remember Barry talking about there's not 5 stories to tell; they're like 500, and they're probably 5,000. Like it's hard to narrow all this down, and that's the work, is trying to keep it narrow and focused, so it's an efficient story that is easy to listen to.
And that is important, that we don't throw everything in the kitchen sink in because it's there in the Bible. There's so much detail and there's so much to talk about. But if we did that, we're talking about huge, long, and we want people to watch this.
Right. Yeah. My wife, Lindsay, I'm a Bible teacher and I get to preach as well. And early on, Lindsay, my wife, would tell me, keep it simple.
Yeah.
Keep it safe. And that is probably the best advice I've gotten. And she tells me a lot, because you get excited about where all it goes and all the applications and all of the examples the Bible gives you, what all it tells you about God and his character. And Exodus is kind of this knot that holds the rest of the Bible tapestry together. So it's hard not to get into all of that. But we've really got to practice some self-restraint. And that's just with the story right now. So I'm not sure what we're going to do when we get into the land itself.
These visuals, yeah. So you have used the term meta-narrative, and we use it and we kind of laugh about it, but it's a real thing. And explain exactly what you mean when you say meta-narrative and what we're trying to get across here.
Yeah, it's a very presumptuous sort of idea, meta-narrative. It's the idea of the story of all stories. And that means that you have a view high enough above all the stories to say that this is the story that makes sense of every story. It's kind of the 5 blind men and the elephant. And the only way you know that no one, you know this illustration?
I don't.
Okay.
Please.
It's the 5 blind men of Indostan. There's a poem that goes with it. And it's these 5 guys, they walk up to the elephant, and one, none of them can see. And so they take hold of different parts of the elephant. And so one has a hold of the trunk. He says, I think an elephant is very much like a snake. One takes a hold of the tusk. And so I think an elephant's very much like a spear, or very much like a wall, or very much like a pillar, or like a fan, they're holding the ear. And we all kind of laugh at that because we see the whole picture. And the only reason that we laugh is because we actually have access to the whole picture. What we're claiming with the meta-narrative is we know the whole picture of every story that's ever been told. So the idea that we're trying to communicate is that the Bible is that meta-narrative. And within that meta-narrative, within that story of all stories, within the whole elephant picture, there are little vignettes of that whole picture. And Exodus is kind of one of those major expositions of that vignette. You see it in the garden. You see it with the flood. We'll see it later with the exile. They're different, out of Egypt, out of exile. That picture keeps coming around to every personal story. So everyone has their Egypt. That's the idea, is this is the story that connects with everyone, because we've all been enslaved. We've all said, I have a master. Whether we use those words or not, we say that this is the thing that has control of my life. It's what I'm working for. It's who I want to please. It's what I want to achieve. And so what Exodus tells us is we need to serve the right master in order to gain freedom and life and promise and blessings. And so it kind of tells that story in a very efficient way. So what we got to be careful to do is not get too big, too fast, so we don't see this simple little story that even children should know.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the appeal is that it's the father telling the son, here's the story. And I came out of Egypt. And fathers for generations are supposed to be telling their children this. So it's not that they literally came out of Egypt. It's just that that story is very real and significant to them. And it should be to each of us, whether or not I was a Jew or I have that actual genetic heritage, is that idea is the life of every human, because we believe that God made us with a promise in mind where we're blessed to live in his presence, and he's calling us back to that. He wants to free us from slavery and bring us into his presence. So I get excited about that. I've talked for a long time. Does that kind of answer your question?
No, it does. And so kind of talking about that, the idea of telling this story from the perspective of a father recounting this to their son. That was something we actually discussed previously when we were putting together the trailer.
Right.
And how important is it to... Let me just step back and say that was the way that they were told to recount the Passover.
That's right.
We are not Jewish. We don't celebrate the Passover. Why should we recount it that way?
Yeah, you're right. We're not Jewish. What the Bible teaches, though, again, with this story of all stories, is that Abraham didn't start off Jewish either.
Right.
And he had a father who had a father who had a father, and he knew of Noah and the flood, and they could trace it back to the garden. It's everyone's story. And I think about my children, and we talk to our children regularly. We have home Bible studies often, and it's a regular everyday open your Bibles and let's read and let's talk and let's ask questions, because this is your story.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought that comes into my mind is I'm not just teaching, and we've told our kids this, we're not teaching you for your sake only. We're teaching you so that you can teach your children so that they can teach theirs, because you need to know God and they need to know God. And the most important thing about you is what you think about when you think about God. So no, we're not Jewish, but knowing God's the most important thing about us. He's the one who made us. There's a book I've been reading in preparation for writing story and working on all this, and it's about this man. He was a rabbi, and he got to do the funeral for this guy who lived through the Holocaust. And so he knew his background, he knew his story. And this rabbi, in telling the story, he went back and, he was rummaging through some thrift shops, and he came across a Seder plate. Seder, it's like Passover meal, right?
Yeah, right.
And the fathers are sitting around culturally every year with their family doing what we're talking about, father-son story. And he came across this Seder plate, and he recognized it as this guy's Seder plate. And the reason it was such a important find for him at this thrift store was because the story that this old guy told who lived through the Holocaust was before he went to the concentration camp, where he knew he was probably going to die, he took his Seder plate and he buried it by this tree, because he thought, I've got to get out, because they want to kill us, but I won't let them kill our story. And I got to get out, and I got to get this plate. Because I want my children and my children's children to know this Passover story, this Exodus story. And he, of all his family, survived the Holocaust. And he got out, got the plate, and used it. Which makes you think, well, then why did the rabbi find it in the thrift shop? And so he took it and went to the owner of the shop in New York. And he's like, where'd you get this? And he said, well, it was an estate sale. Some old guy died, and his kids didn't want it.
Wow.
The plate survived the Holocaust, but it didn't survive the next generation. And so that's why we're telling this story, is we want our kids and the future generations, kids that we'll never meet, realize that they have an Egypt they need to leave, that they have a Savior who wants to bring them faithfully into his promise. So that's the father-son. And it may be that it's my kids, but again, kids that you never meet before. This story lives on. And it's got to make it into the hearts and minds and souls of the next generation.
Mm-hmm. You know, and when I've looked at the Exodus in the past, before really digging into it for this project, you know, a lot of times I feel like we grow up with the Exodus and we hit the highlights. We hit the 10 plagues, and our children can recite and sing the pretty little song about the 10 plagues. And we hit the Red Sea, and how cool is it to walk across the Red Sea? You know, we hit the 10 Commandments, and we see them coming, you know. But it's so much more than just this highlight reel.
Right.
And you know, I'm going to ask you, like, have we at some level kind of disconnected ourselves from this story because we have grown up just looking at the highlights? It's almost like these are superheroes. Moses is the superhero that does this.
Right. Yeah. Exodus is the book right before that boring book.
Yeah,
Leviticus, right? And so it's like Genesis, love all those stories. Do you really? Because there's some strange ones in there. You know, what's going on with Judah and Tamar, and, you know, some of those, like, they're strange stories.
Yeah.
And I don't use strange in a flippant way. It's just, like you're right. We hit the highlight reel. Then you get to Exodus, and we mostly make it to the golden calf, and we call it quits because that's the important stuff. But there's a lot more to be told. I'm excited about some of the tabernacle imagery we're going to be talking about and what that means. It's not just this tent in the desert, in the wilderness. It is God's desire to live, to dwell amongst his people. And they didn't have that since the garden. And so it's part of this overarching picture. And these highlights are important, but what do they lead to? And that's what I'm hoping people will get from this project.
So we have announced our next major project looking at the biblical lands of the Exodus. Come along as Jeremy and our film crew travel to ancient Egyptian sites, take a 4x4 through the Sinai Peninsula, and camp in the deserts of the Jordanian wilderness on this incredible journey. The documentary is called Out of Egypt, and we're currently fundraising for post-production for this extraordinary project.
Right now, if you go to fundraiser.appianmedia.org, you can help support this project with a donation of any amount. Your donation will ensure that post-production for Out of Egypt can be the best it possibly can be. We are 501c3 and all donations are tax deductible.
That's right, pre-production is finished, production is currently going on, and we cannot wait to share more about this journey with you. Please consider donating today to make Out of Egypt a reality. And thanks.
So when you look at this wall, this very colorful wall, what excites you the most about the way we're going to tell this story?
You know, one of the things I'm super excited about, when you think of Exodus or you think of Egypt in the Bible, Charlton Heston comes to mind. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing that for the first time, and I was like, wait a minute. And, you know, I was in the mindset at the time that biblical, attempts to capture the biblical story on film, they were always just frustrating because, like, well, that didn't happen in the Bible, that didn't happen in the Bible. And that's important. I think we wanted to think through that idea and talk about that idea. What's biblically accurate? You know, that's part of Appian Media's goal, is to be biblically accurate. Yeah. And I remember going to see Prince of Egypt in the movie theater for the very first time. And I was just so frustrated because, you know, there's parts of it was like, that's not accurate. That's not accurate. Okay. And then I got over it because we want to be accurate. But I think what those films were trying to do is they were trying to capture the story and the feeling. And there have been a lot of different Exodus projects. What was the Christian Bale one?
What was that one?
Ridley Scott helped it.
Yeah. That was a big
like
movie.
Gods of Egypt or Gods of...
Yes.
Anyway, not recommending. I've not seen it. But it's just, there have been all kinds of attempts to get at the story. And so what we've done, I think, as Bible students, is we've talked about the accuracy. We've talked about the archaeological evidence. We've talked about the history. And that's right, too. One of the things I'm most excited about this is trying to have a balanced approach to just telling the story. So as we go to these locations, all of these, if you can see it on YouTube or wherever you're watching this podcast, all the pink here, we're looking at animating the story. And I'm not talking about, like Prince of Egypt style, right. DreamWorks. We don't have that kind of talent or budget, or even that's necessarily what we want to do. Right. We want to help people imagine the feeling that the scriptures are
Right.
trying to
Because
help us imagine.
you mentioned the other day that we don't want to tell people this is a fairy tale. We
Right.
want to show them this is still real,
Right.
but do it through this animated
And so I'm
style.
hoping by going to the actual locations, and again, some of these locations, we don't know where they are, but we know that they happened. And we know where the Red Sea is. We know where Egypt is. We know where, we know generally where these things happen, and we know that it did happen. So what we want to do is kind of help people layer those two ideas, that this is a story that should live in us, and it really happened. It is a story, it's a fairy tale that's real, if you will. And so that's the thing I'm most excited about as I look at this, all the pink that is trying to help us capture the emotion of, we're going to places that, Karnak, right? Or Sharm el-Sheikh. These are names that don't appear in my Bible.
Yeah.
But that's the modern name of a real location that connects to the biblical story. Right. But then I look at the parting of the Red Sea or the Passover or the burning bush. I don't know where that happened, but I know it did. And so thinking about these real places and merging those two, that's what I'm really excited about, is helping people to try to relive that story so that when we're done watching this, they'll want to reenact it in their lives. That's the thing I'm most excited about looking at this.
Well, and something that comes out when you study these places in history and you look at the geography that you don't maybe necessarily see quite as in front of you in the Bible is this culture. This was the world power at the time.
Yes.
And there is still tons of evidence that this was a huge power at that time. And so
Right.
like going and you mentioned the Karnak, like that's a temple complex where they worshiped all kinds of Egyptian gods.
Right.
We don't read about those gods per se in the Bible, but when you go there and you go, wow, this was the culture that the people we read about in the Bible were
Right.
living in at that time.
Right.
All of a sudden, I think light bulbs start going off in your head.
Yeah, it's a testament to the power of humans to craft our own gods.
Yeah.
And they have lived on. We were talking earlier, I think yesterday, about, I don't think there are people today in Egypt still worshiping like, Amun-Ra. And then we kind of went,
Maybe.
but even if they're not,
Yeah.
we still are busy crafting our own gods. And so, God gets Israel out of Egypt. But the question is Israel going to get Egypt out of them? And as they get to Mount Sinai, that's part of this big story. And it's a story that we hope people will be thinking about for themselves, is what parts of the world are still impacting me? And we're hoping that people will be able to connect those dots themselves as they watch this. Yeah.
So you are one of the new members to the field team, I will say.
Right.
You've been behind the scenes on a number of projects already, but then we go off into the country, we shoot, and we bring back stuff. But now you're coming with us.
Right.
How do you feel about that? How are you feeling right now? 5 weeks out. How are you feeling?
It hasn't hit me yet. I keep thinking what I've said is I'm just along for the ride. So I don't ask me again in 5 weeks.
When you get on that plane.
When I get on the plane.
Or when you step off that plane.
Yeah. And maybe even after I come back home, I'm excited. Really, I'm thinking a lot about people I'm leaving behind. And there are a lot of people who are sacrificing to make this happen. People who've given, who've contributed, who've donated, people who are praying. And so, people who are out here listening, if you would be praying for our families.
Yeah.
They're making a sacrifice for 2 weeks. Somebody asked my son just a couple of days ago, "How are you feeling about your dad going to Egypt?" And he said, "I'm going to miss him." And I thought,
yeah.
But I was happy he said that.
Right.
I was very happy he said that. But they are making a sacrifice, and so I'm thinking about, is this a sacrifice that's worth making? Something that's worth sacrificing for me, for them, and we believe it is. So, yeah, I'm excited. I'm very focused. I want to be very intentional. People who've given to this project, they're looking for the impact that this will make. They're entrusting us with the skills that God's given. And look, I think there are a lot of people who could do a better job than us. I mean, no offense.
Right.
But like, Craig is great at what he does. You're great at what you do. Jet, wow, there's just people who are really talented. What Jeremy does on camera, that's not easy to do. And so there are people who are better at this than we are. We've just been blessed with the opportunity. And so if God has put it in our way, then we'll do our best with it and trust him to be pleased as he helps us to accomplish it.
Awesome. Well, we are going to have a lot more to talk about. I know that I know in country we're going to have more conversations, and this board behind us is going to have to get distilled down into words that come out on screen, and then scripts that are written, and so
right. And then the study guides,
and
conversations to follow. So, well, I'll ask you in the last couple of days, you've been thinking through this. Do you feel better about where we're headed with the story? Or?
Oh. Man. Yeah, I do. I love what the role I feel like I play is I get to be a fly on the wall inside these conversations, and I'll go next week and be a fly on the wall inside the production team's conversations. And every time that I've seen our team collaborate in a real meaningful way and create space for that, like the last couple of days, good things come out of it.
Yeah.
And so, I think back 2.5 days to where we were, and it was those whiteboards sitting over in the corner with just some high level scripture references and some things like that on there, and it got to this top board, and then we distilled it down even further, and we'll continue to do that. And so now I'm really excited about where it goes. And every time we finish a project, I immediately go to how are we going to top that. And that was the way I felt with Trial and Triumph. I'm like, this is so good. How in the world are we going to top this? And already I can see like this has got legs to really be the next level.
It's intimidating. But no, it's very exciting. No, we get done with Trial and Triumph, and I saw it on the screen. And I was just like, yeah. And I was like, okay. But you're already thinking, okay, let's go out and do it again.
That's the way my brain.
Yeah.
But,
that's good. That's good. I'm excited. That's exhausting, but it's good. We need people like that.
That's right. Well, thank you, Justin. I really appreciate all the time and energy you put into it. So we're excited to go.
Thanks for letting me be along for the ride.
Man, you can just see Justin's excitement as he gets
He's not
talking
one
about it.
That gets super. He doesn't emote a lot with his excitement.
Right.
He's very even keel, but even at times it's like you see it kind of
the wheels are turning.
The wheels are turning.
And
the glimmer in his eye.
That's right. Maybe that's a better way of describing it. And I'm so blessed that we can have him as part of this team. It's not like he's a new member. He's been heavily involved in the story and especially in the writing of a lot of our material. And now we're letting him step more into this role and really help contribute to what goes on camera during this production.
Yeah. I'll tell you, just again pulling the curtain back from our conversations the past few days, he is already finding things that he can take off of other people's plates when we're in country. And there've been conversations where, I would naturally go, yeah, I'll take care of that, and he'll be like, no, actually, that I can do that for you, and like. That's the kind of thing he's going to contribute a lot in that way, and we're going to go, oh man, you're right. Justin is here to help in this way. And it's so cool.
That's going to be so valuable.
I think he, it's hard to tell, but I think at the same time as we're putting all this on the wall and he's processing the story that's going to come out of this documentary, he's also personally processing, I am going to travel to this place, and what does that mean, and what does that look like? And of course, as we've all talked about, the impact it has on our families and that kind of thing. So there's a lot going on in his head, as there is with everybody right now. But we'll
get some more behind the scenes with this guy while we're in country for sure. Because it hits us all differently, but it all hits us the same in some ways.
Right. And this was us 5 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. I certainly had never been that distance away from my family ever. Yeah. And I certainly had never been that long away from my wife or my kids ever. Mm-hmm. And for Justin to do that, the sacrifices that he and everyone on our team are willing to make so that we can create this content and share it with others, it's an important thing to note. Yeah. And we appreciate their contribution. Yeah. So guys, this is going to be such an exciting story. And it's not, as Justin mentioned and Jeremy did in the past episode, it's not because we're creating such an exciting story.
Right.
It's the story is so exciting. We're just trying to help everyone see it.
Yeah.
God already did it. Mm-hmm. The Holy Spirit already did it so well. We're just trying to do it justice.
Yeah, it is. So we've got a lot more content that we're going to continue to create and put out over the next few months.
Oh yes, brace yourselves.
Yeah, exactly. and honestly, the ongoing future as we get into post-production on out of Egypt and Lessons from the Land of the Exodus,
Right.
we are going to pull back that curtain, give everybody an all-access pass to what it takes to make content like this, so people see that this is a big deal and this is a big undertaking. And so we're excited to share that.
Yeah, and not to pat ourselves on the back, not to, try to bring any more glory to us,
Right.
but I view it as mostly the 350 plus people
Exactly.
who contributed to this project.
And
we
the
want
members
them
that
to
continue
know,
to
and
contribute.
the members that make the everyday expenses of this thing feasible. We want you to see what your investment is doing and what's involved in that, and to help you appreciate just the great work that's being done by so many.
Yeah,
So
it's great.
thank you guys for joining us with this conversation. There is more to come for sure, and we'll be excited to share that with you once we get back from Egypt.
That's right. Next time you hear from
That's
us,
right.
it will be once we get back from Egypt.
That's right. We'll see you
We
then.
will be out of Egypt.
We will be out of the joke. It
I
had to
had
happen.
to get that in.
Come on.
And we're going to end like that?
We are going to end
Oh.
exactly like that. Throughout this season of inRoads, we'll continue highlighting others that are using digital media to spread the good news of the Gospels. And we'll also pull the curtain back of Out of Egypt and talk with various members of our own team as we develop, fundraise, produce our most ambitious, challenging, and rewarding project that we have ever done. That's next time on inRoads. inRoads is a production of Appian Media. We're a non-profit video production company that is 100% crowd-funded. If you're interested in learning more about how you can support Appian Media so we can continue to create more great free content, visit us at appianmedia.org.